For what is a very exciting panel for us, because this is the first ever panel for Capital Ocean Week. We always try to do different things. A couple of years ago, we had authors' coffees. We had some movie screenings a few years ago. This is the first time that we are turning over one of our panels to the future leaders of the country, future scientists, future lawyers, future politicians. This panel will feature the youth of America from across the country, and there's really no better person to introduce this panel than Congresswoman Lois Capps. The Congresswoman has been a great champion not only for national marine sanctuaries. She's got two within her district, Channel Islands and Monterey Bay. She's the co-chair with Dr. Benishek for the Sanctuary Caucus in the House of Representatives. But Congresswoman Capps really has, if it's even more than sanctuaries, she's been a champion for education and for STEM education, and even more specifically than that, ocean education. And one of her signature initiatives for which she's championed and brought a lot of money to the program, it's the BWET program. And the BWET program has been really stupendous for NOAA and for kids around the country. So thank you for support on that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Congresswoman Capps.
Thank you, and it's a little bit my fault that you got a little hurried through lunch and rushed back in here. I'm at work today up there, and they're about to call some votes, so I wanted to have a chance to meet our panel and to congratulate you all on another another Capitol Hill Ocean Week, the wave of the future. What do the youth of America think? I can't salute you enough for centering this around the next generation, because that what we do, eighth graders like to take a tour to Washington, D.C., or in the social studies class. If you have been in eighth grade recently, you remember. And if they have a chance to do that, they have bake sales and raise the money, get on the plane. Some of them have never been on a plane, and they stand on Capitol Hill steps, and I tell them, what I worked on in creating legislation and hopefully doing what the people who elected me have sent me to Washington, D.C. to do is important. But it's particularly important for young people because they're going to bear the goods and the bad of what we legislate for the longest period of time until they get involved and can change it or make it better. And that's what this generation of ocean-oriented young people is going to do. So I salute the Sanctuary Foundation for knowing how important it is to feature our young people. I see several in the audience as well. I want to thank everybody for being here. And I really covet always the opportunity to welcome you all and today to introduce this panel. I want to acknowledge that our Sanctuary Caucus is going strong on Capitol Hill, and Representative Dan Benishek is going to be providing closing remarks. He represents the sanctuary in Michigan. I represent the corner of Monterey in my district in California. He's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, so it's as diverse as you can get here in Washington, D.C., geographically and politically, and that's the way it should be. It's not a partisan issue. And that's what you do with Capitol Hill Ocean Week, is you bring us all together. And this week, and indeed all of this month, has been designated by our president as National Oceans Month. A wonderful opportunity to reflect on the importance of the oceans and how we interact with them. Every month that goes by, every year for sure, that goes by is more critical in terms of the future of our oceans, the health of our oceans. I'm a public health nurse by background, so I focus on the health of our oceans, and it affects the health of each of us. as human beings as well. We're totally independent. We're fortunate to be blessed in this country by some of the most amazing underwater treasures in the world. I'm getting the signal that probably it's about time that I have to say enough of me, and just to tell you that our caucus is going to continue to focus on the issues you talk about this week, and to say how this is a new thing for me. This is particularly poignant for me since some of you know we've had an oil spill in my district on the Central Coast of California. So if ever we need to be mindful, we need to be mindful now. And it's because of our young people that we need to do this. So without further ado, who do I turn it back to? I'd like to say this handsome man right to my right, but I'm not sure he wants the spotlight.
You can say this handsome man.
Look at, I don't know. Can you hold a candle to him? Maybe you can. Can I let you both?
So, as they say, age before beauty. Thank you, Congresswoman Capps, especially given the voting schedule on the House side this afternoon. So our next panel, I'm going to quickly turn it over to the voices of tomorrow. A quick introduction. I want to say welcome once again to our audience in Alpena, Michigan. Thunder Bay, he's got a particular interest in this afternoon's panel, and usually I let the moderator introduce everybody, but I'm going to give two special shout-outs. One to Hannah MacDonald, who is the Volunteer of the Year for the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and so she's got a good home crowd rooting for her online. And another shout-out to Nate Marshall, who was with us at the gala Tuesday night, and Secretary, Senator, Governor Kempthorne gave Nate a really nice shout out as he hails from Boise, Idaho, the governor's home. So you guys can applaud later. So with that, let me introduce Daniela Fernandez, who will be our moderator for this session. Daniela, herself an undergrad, is president and founder of the Georgetown Sustainable Oceans Alliance. She'll go into more detail herself on what it is, but it's a student-led organization with over 1,000 participants in person online. They run the Sustainable Ocean Summit, and it's a really great effort to empower millennials in becoming leaders for tomorrow on ocean health and sustainability. It's really wonderful when we have the leader of this panel still an undergraduate. So this whole time is going to get off and turn it over to Daniela.
And thank you everyone for being here today. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here. To give you a little background of why this is honestly a dream come true. The reason why I started the Sustainable Oceans Alliance was because I was invited to a UN Oceans meeting back in February 2014. And I was sitting next to the Prime Minister of Spain and next to the Ambassador of Italy. And they're like, oh, what country are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm from Georgetown University. Which they're like, oh, okay, that's wonderful. But as I looked around me, I realized that I was the only young person in the room. Everyone else was a scientist, policy leader, and the word really wasn't getting out. They were preaching to the choir. They were talking about the same research. They were talking about the same findings with the same exact people. So leaving that session, I felt an inherent responsibility to leave and do something about this problem. And the problem is involving millennials and giving them a voice, giving them a platform to really be empowered and to be aware of all the opportunities that exist out there. And that is why I started the Sustainable Oceans Alliance. And again, this is why I'm so happy to see all these young faces here. And I'm so happy that you'll be hearing about their experiences, you'll be hearing about their efforts, you'll be hearing about their passion and what really drives them. But ultimately, this isn't just a conversation for us to have, but also to involve you. And I want to make sure that you ask questions throughout the panel. So our hashtag is Child2015. And for those of you watching online, you can tune in to Oceans Live. This is a very unique opportunity for everyone to understand what drives millennials and also understand how you can engage with us further. To get your thoughts flowing a little bit, I want to share with you recent findings from a study by the David and Lucille Packard Foundation in collaboration with Edge Research. So they found the study focus was in relation to millennials and ocean conservation. So number one is millennials believe that individuals are the source of solutions instead of institutions and governments. I mean, wrap your head around that. It's kind of a big deal that we don't trust our government. We don't trust NGOs anymore to make a difference. So we believe that we can be empowered and we can do make an impact ourselves. Number 2 is we don't perceive oceans as an urgent cause. You may ask yourself, why is that the case? Well, it's because we're not presented with visuals. We're not presented with constant reminders of how fast the ocean is decaying. And that's something to really think about, how you continue your ocean campaigns, how you use social media to advance your causes. And the third finding is that we are lifestyle activists. And that means that we are more likely than previous generations to take a specific action to change our habits. If we are encouraged, if we are emotionally compelled to make a difference in our lifestyles, we will do so. For example, you can go from recycling bags to encouraging our parents to eat a more like vegan, vegetarian-friendly diet, and so forth. So really keep that in mind as we continue our discussion today. And also, I wanted to let you know that we are not as bad as they make us seem out there. We are not self-centered, or we're not the me generation. We're actually the how can we solve the problems generation. And we look beyond political dialogue. We don't care if it's a red or a blue state. We care about the problems and how we're going to fix them. So with that, I would like to introduce our panel now to discuss further your experiences, your thoughts, and how we're going to change the world. So here on my left, we have Cole. And Cole is a rising senior at Hernando High School in Florida. He completed his first underwater science project at the age of 12, so very young. And you've been studying corals along Florida's nature coast, is that right?
That's right.
And he also has logged over 120 dives. So he's been underwater and will give us a good overview of what is down there. Next, we have Hannah MacDonald. She is in her second year at Michigan State University, studying environmental zoology, environmental studies, and marine ecosystem management. So she has a lot on her plate and is happy to here join us. Then we have Nate Marshall, who is at Boise High School, and he's a captain of the Boise National Ocean Science Bowl, which has won national tournament for the last 2 years. He also competes in the academic quiz tournament and policy debate. Then we have Nicolle Martinez, who is a rising freshman at Columbia University, where she will be studying biology and starting her pre-med track. She is part of a marine biology research program, and through this she began an eelgrass restoration project in 2012, which she'll be talking about later on today. And now we have, last but not least, Joshua Monette. He's an enrolled member of the Makah Indian tribe, an ocean-dependent people located in the remote northwestern tip of Washington state. He's working with fisheries management and also working on as a marine mammals technician. So welcome our panel, please. Alrighty now, so to get things started, I would like for everyone here to discuss how each of you were first introduced to ocean issues, like what drove your passion, what led to that spark, and what experiences in your community or in school led for you to be here.
Well, I'll start off, and first I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to have this presentation. You know, it means a lot to me, and it's great for me to come up here and share all my knowledge and expertise on my field of study, which is, first off, I'd like to say that I'm from Brooksville, Florida, which is a small little town in central Florida. And, you know, when the term marine biology comes to mind, you don't think Brooksville. So off the coast of Brooksville is just, you know, there's small little patch reefs and, you know, tons of fishing, mangroves, palm trees. And it's nothing like the Keys or reefs, you know, and the Caribbean. So, you know, growing up, I never knew that there were coral or, you know, large reef fish or even tropical fish out there. And I got into the program called Scubanauts International, which they're sitting just back there. And so it's a group of kids, 12 through 18, and it's all about education through exploration. So I highly recommend you guys look them up. And so we get out there, we do underwater science, we do diving, we work with Mote Marine Laboratory, we work with tons of other nonprofit organizations, all focused on sustainability, conservation, and science all around. So when I got into the program, I started doing a lot of diving off my coast, and I'm like, hey, there's actually really cool stuff here. And so, you know, around that time, I think it was about 2010, 5 years ago, and that was also the time of the Deep Horizon oil spill. And I realized, well, there's a lot of monitoring going on in that area for reefs and corals and fishes up there. So why don't I start to look at, coral and fish in the reefs off my coast? So that's basically how I got started. And ever since, I've been continuing research, and it's really, been an exciting pathway.
Thank you. Hannah?
All right, so I grew up on Thunder Bay in Alpena, Michigan on Lake Huron. I swam, snorkeled, and sailed when I was little, so I loved the water, couldn't get enough of it. When I was 14, I became scuba certified through a local dive shop. So that opened up many doors for me to see many more shipwrecks that the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary has to offer. So I knew about the shipwrecks already, and then I was going into my sophomore year of high school, and I saw a new class offered called Shipwreck Alley. It's a place-based education class, and it deals with the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and it deals with some science and weather issues that also led to the shipwrecks. So I learned a lot about the Great Lakes in that class, and the class actually opened up a lot of doors for me with the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary when I got to go out on the glass-bottom boat and meet many of the staff members at the sanctuary as well. So I became a volunteer there, and I actually ended up volunteering on the glass-bottom boat as an interpreter and also on a little discovery cart talking about invasive species and the different types of cargo the ships would carry. So I did a little bit of volunteering my sophomore year, and then as long as my junior year. And then I applied for Ocean for Life my junior year, which I had found out about through the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and I was accepted. I'm sure some of you might know about Ocean for Life, but it is a program that took place for me in the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, where 15 U.S. and 15 Middle Eastern students met, and we were there for 2 weeks to learn about cultural understanding and marine conservation. So that was my first big step into learning about the ocean. I learned so much at Ocean for Life that I still feed from today, and it was such a great program to start a career that I hope to lead in marine conservation.
Wonderful. Nate?
Okay, so first I'd like to say that I'm very humbled to be able to have the opportunity to talk before such a distinguished audience. And I'm from Idaho, which has not had a coastline for several million years, and hopefully will not have a coastline in the near future as well. So it doesn't seem the most logical that I would be interested and passionate about ocean science. But through the National Ocean Sciences Bowl, I was able to develop that passion in a unique way. And I was part of a quiz bowl club with several teammates who are here, Karthik Mowley, Benjamin Huang, and Eric Huang. And we decided to travel to the Regional Ocean Sciences Bowl tournament in Corvallis, Oregon during my freshman year, just because we were very interested in quiz bowl tournaments and because we figured we wanted to try something new. And that was the beginning of my ocean experience. That really piqued my interest, and after that we realized that the oceans were incredibly amazing, and there was so much information that we wanted to learn about them. We were interested in the policy and the biology and the history and the geology, and Ocean Bowl became our main focus as a quiz bowl club after that. And since then we've had some success at the National Ocean Sciences Bowl, and that's provided us with some incredible opportunities to that program, which has done a great job of connecting us with individuals and with organizations that really empower us. And I'm really grateful for the opportunities the program has provided and for allowing me to develop a passion for the ocean, even 400 miles away from the nearest coastline.
Thank you, Nicolle.
All right, first off, thank you for the opportunity to be here. When I started the research project in 2012, I definitely didn't expect to end up here. I'm from New York City. I attended New York Harbor School and am a marine biology research student there. So in that program, it's very hands-off. The teacher's like, this program is what you make of it. And I go to a school that's very oyster-centered. It has run the Billion Oyster Project, trying to restore oysters to New York Harbor. I found out I was allergic to oysters. So that was definitely not going to be my course of study, but I still wanted something that was going to make a difference. So after doing a little bit of research, I found out about eelgrass, and through my teacher, Mauricio Gonzalez, who unfortunately couldn't make it today, he put me in touch with someone who was working with someone else at Cornell's Cooperative Extension in Southold, Long Island. So once going to the facility, I fell in love, and it was all amazing, and I wanted to restore eelgrass, a species of subaquatic vegetation wiped out by nearly 99% in the 1930s. So it's not as in your face as, say, oysters or restoring sharks or something like that, because it's a grass and it's a plant and it's like watching grass grow. But to me, that was like my outlet. It was something I wanted to give 110% because I saw it as an underdog in the estuary and something that, although it was native, wasn't getting not nearly as much attention as other organisms were. So having that teacher to push me and say, listen, this is your responsibility. If this project floats or not, that's completely on you. You make every decision. You need something, I'll provide it. You need materials, I got you. Budget, not a problem. But you have to do this. And that's where I essentially took up the role. And after being given the ability to be so hands-on and do entirely what I want to do with the project, I chose to take that project and extend it out to kids younger than me, so that they would be able to have that same experience that I did.
That's great. Thank you, Nicolle. Josh?
So I'm from the Washington coastline in a little place called Neah Bay, Washington. I live on the Makah Indian Reservation, and so we have on one side the Pacific Ocean and on the other side the Straits of Juan de Fuca. And so the Makah people, we've been reliant on the ocean for thousands of years. Our oldest village site is maybe about 5,000 years. And we don't have productive river systems or very much in our forests, so we've relied on the ocean for our sustainability and our sustenance. And so the importance of the ocean back at home, is the fisheries. Back then it was really important. And so when we signed the treaty in 1855, we actually gave up over 90% of our land to secure our rights on the ocean. The rights on the ocean are very important to us. The right to fish, to gather shellfish, and to actually hunt too were all very important to us, and we secured those in the treaty. And so today our fisheries is still one of the largest sources of income for people back at home. My mom grew up fishing, and a lot of my family, my brother did it right out of high school. And so it's still very important to us. I believe we have the largest and most diversified fishery of any tribe in the United States. And so I just kind of came into worrying about the ocean by nature. Back at home, it's really important. It's vital that it remains a sustainable resource, vital to our lifestyle and vital to our culture. So.
Thank you, Josh, so much. Now I want to go back to coral really quickly and ask you to just elaborate a little bit on your coral restoration projects and talk about the limitations and obstacles you've encountered.
Great. So real quick, I'd like to clarify, my coral restoration or research projects on my own?
Oh, both.
Okay. So since 2010, I've done several projects all about a specific species off of Hernando County, Florida. I started looking at it with Scubanauts on my dives, and I realized there wasn't much known about it. So I was required to do a science fair project in middle school. So I figured, I'm going to go big or go home. So I started looking at this coral, and I did some research on it, and there wasn't really anything known about it. So they didn't even know how old it was or where even it could thrive. So, it was on every single reef, and I decided I was going to start looking at different environmental parameters, any relationships it has with other species, and just to see what overall affects its health. So I started out by comparing different reefs and looking at symbiotic relationships it has with different fish and crabs that inhabit it. So every reef I go to, I see, okay, there's fish here, but they're all on this coral. And then I started to look closer, and then there's a specific species of crab that was on every single coral. So I compared sizes of coral and looked at how those affect the health of the coral. And in general, they all, the coral provided the home for these fish and crabs, as you see on many other branching corals, and they also kept it clean and prevented, invasive algae growth on the coral. So after that, I started looking at, I wanted to see what was killing off the coral, because I knew, from going out time and time, there were corals that, were there, and then I'd go out, a few months later, and then that one was gone. So through photography and through a computer software, I was able to take pictures of these corals, and there are two different things that grew on the coral. One was an invasive algae species, and then also an encrusting sponge. So the determinants I figured of these were basically from pollution and runoff from the inshore rivers. Now, Hernando County and Citrus County, which are right off my reefs, there's 4 major rivers, with tons of housing and development along them. So those also, push out all sorts of, fertilizers and pollutants and contaminants. So I figured, that's what was causing this growth. So I started to compare the inshore reefs and the offshore reefs, basically to determine, what was causing this, and then which corals were healthier, and basically just to get an overall standpoint of the reefs off my coast. So from then on, I've done many monitoring projects. I have temperature probes made by HoboWare, and so those I set out about yearly, and they monitor temperature every hour. So, and then I go and collect them and pull them off. So I get a really good, good environmental parameters of what the coral's going through. And the range is about 50 degrees, which is pretty good for a coral in the Gulf of Mexico. And also, I started to look at growth rates. So the way I would do that is take pictures of the coral with a scale measurement, just a meter stick, and then use the computer software to go in and measure, how big the coral was in certain areas. And then I go back in with the pictures from years later. Almost every year I look at it for 5 years, and I could determine basically what the average growth rate was, and that turned out to be about 0.29 inches a year, which is pretty slow compared to other branching corals as this is. So if you look at staghorn or acropora, those are growing 4 centimeters to 8 centimeters a year, which is pretty fast for coral. So from then on, basically, I've just looked at it and determined different things that affect its health, and it's been an exciting project, and I'm still going out there and doing more monitoring, and currently my temperature probes are still measuring out there. And so, it's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to the data I'm going to collect in the future. Also, Scubanauts International has done lots of work with Mote Marine Laboratories in the Keys. If you've seen at the gala, they had, the big Caitlin the camera, the 3D camera, and you could see they went through the coral restoration zone and the nursery in the Keys. So Scubanauts has had a chance to go down there in the past for about 3 years now and monitor the corals and participate in restoration. So it's really interesting because it's all about, promoting the growth of the reefs and restoring, what's happened. And so they use Acropora cervicornis, which is staghorn coral, so it's very fast growing. And so, as you can see, if you did get to see the pictures, they have these large trees. They look like Christmas trees underwater. And they take those and they hang the corals up there, and then they grow a lot faster, and then they go and we outplant them on the reefs. So doing that has really enabled me to, get out there, experience different things, see different types of research, and it's just been really exciting.
Thank you, Cole. It's so nice to see that something that started from a very young age still keeps you going. Now, Hannah, can you talk a little bit about the Ocean for Life project program? You mentioned that there's a cultural understanding aspect to it that relates specifically to oceans. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so as I said before, there were 15 Middle Eastern students and 15 US students. I come from a small town in northern Michigan, so I really hadn't been exposed to many different cultures before. So this part for me was super interesting. I had never met someone personally that was from the Middle East, and these students were all my age. So to start about just their cultural similarities and differences, we did a pie piece that we all had to do while we were at Ocean for Life, and we put them all in a circle, and it was amazing to see how many similarities were on each person's pie. We did things like our favorite music singer or our favorite candy, things like that, and things about our families, and it was just amazing to see all the similarities. And then this we tied into how everything in the ocean is connected, like how everybody on Earth is connected. So people need to have connections with people on other sides of the Earth, just like fish need to have symbiotic relationships with other fish or corals or anything like that. So it was really cool to see how to compare the two between the ocean and human with cultural understanding and being interconnected. So I was a part of a media group that chose the topic for our film, which you guys can check it out on YouTube. It's under the Sanctuaries page for Ocean for Life 2013. My movie was called Interconnectedness, and my favorite quote from the movie that we made was, "Everybody is downstream." So this deals with both people and fish in the ocean, that everything that we do affects everybody else around the world, and things that happen to different species in the ocean can affect other different species in the ocean. And it was just amazing to be at Ocean for Life and see how everything was connected. And it just opened my eyes to how the world works and how the ocean works, and it was just amazing.
Thank you, Hannah. And that also speaks a lot to the power of connectivity across a global spectrum, having social media now at our disposal, which we'll talk about a little more. Nate, now can you talk about some specific activities that you went through or acted upon in the NOSB, the National Ocean Science Bowl?
Sure. So the Ocean Sciences Bowl is primarily a buzzer-based competition, a quiz format, Jeopardy-style competition. And there's another component where we review a bill that's actually up for reauthorization. And this component is called the Science Expert Briefing. And in this stage of the competition, all of our team members take a role. They do like a role-playing exercise. And so we take the role of, for example, a non-governmental organization, chemical oceanographer. And we review the bill from that perspective and then ultimately craft a team recommendation that assimilates the different perspectives of the different members of our group. And it's kind of a mock congressional hearing format. And this exercise allowed me to see a couple interesting things. First of all, it helped me to see how difficult creating scientific policy is. It's oftentimes hard for us to understand all of the compromise, all of the issues, economic, environmental, that must be balanced, that must be prioritized in order to make this. And it also helped me to see the power of compromise, because as a group, we had to take perspectives from industry, we had to take perspectives from academia, and we had to try and make these work together in a way that both was economically and environmentally beneficial. And this was a very difficult task for us, as it is for our entire country. Another thing that Ocean Bowls provided us with is the opportunity to visit with organizations and individuals, as I mentioned. We got to take a trip to New England last year, and we were able to go out on the water and deploy a CTD and plankton sampling and benthic grabs. And being able to experience the hands-on and the practical applications of oceanography was really powerful for me and helped to cement my interest in oceanography, because it went far deeper than just a Wikipedia article or just information or a video. It helped me to see what oceanography was actually about, which was really influential in my development as an aspiring scientist.
Thank you, Nate. I'm sure we'll be seeing all your research papers in the future. Now, Josh, actually, I'll come back to you, Nicolle. Can you briefly talk about, and I'm calling on you now because you have the coastal perspective, whereas Nate had the inland perspective in engaging with ocean issues. Can you talk about the importance of ocean resources and fisheries management to your tribe, and seeing what the future brings and your concerns in ocean acidification and fisheries depletion?
Yeah, I can. So, as I mentioned, we're very dependent on our fisheries, and so it's really important that those remain sustainable fisheries, because we can't have one good year and then not have there be any fish. We need those fish to return year after year, and that's salmon, that's halibut, that's the bottom fish. Like I said, we have a very diversified fishery, and it's important that that remains sustainable. Some of the things that we're starting to see are some of the pollutants showing up in the fish, and some of the PCBs and mercury and those sort of things that are, kind of higher content. And I think that one thing that probably not a lot of people consider is a little bit higher on the food chain. As I mentioned earlier, in our treaty, we secured the rights to take fish, but that also included the right to take seals and whales. And so right now we aren't currently exercising those treaty rights, although we hope to. And so as you move up the food chain, those pollutants, those PCBs, they get higher concentrated and they get stored in the fat of those animals. And so I imagine that not many people would be concerned with, well, should we be concerned about how much is stored in the fat levels of these animals, these marine mammals? But to me, that's a concern, because if one day those levels get too high, then our treaty right won't be any good to us if we can't eat it. So that's one thing that I'm a little bit worried about, is all of the pollutants going into the ocean. And I think it's important that, I don't know how, once those pollutants go in, how we can clean them up. But I think one thing that's really important is the regulation and the laws that govern how much pollutants go into our ocean in the first place. The clean burning of fossil fuels, or as clean as we can, and some of the other, the surface runoff and the other ways that the pollutants end up in our oceans. And, it's not just in our waters, it's in other waters too. For example, up in Canada, they dump the sewage, in Victoria, they dump the sewage right out into the Straits of Juan de Fuca, and that's the same body of water, that's on our north side. And so those pollutants go into our waters, and so it's on more than just the U.S.'s side, it's on an international side, and it's important that we work with other nations to hopefully lower some of those levels and stop some of the dumping of pollutants into the ocean.
Thank you, Josh, for giving us that insight. And now, Nicolle, can we talk a little bit about the reactions of the students you've been teaching about environmental science and the ocean? Because it's really interesting to think about how younger generations are reacting to the climate change or to what their questions are. And I'm sure you can shed some light on that.
Okay, well, I taught children in a variety of different forums. I worked for Coastal Classroom through the City Parks Foundation to teach kids from what they labeled as underserved communities, with community-based organizations like their local YMCA or summer camps. I worked for City of Water Day from the Metropolitan Water Alliance to bring conservational science out to the public. And then my personal project, I worked with Good Shepherd Children and Family Services to bring this restoration project to their front and all of the children that they work with as a children's services corporation. So basically, because all these kids were from different backgrounds, it gave me a complete different type of, I guess you could say, appreciation for educators. I don't know how many educators are in the room, but go you. Because these kids all have different needs. They have different levels of strength in science, and some kids know one things, but others know different ones. And so I was so accustomed to speaking to people who are experts in their field, speaking to governmental agencies and people who already knew the words that I was using, but these kids didn't. So they, when it came up to climate change, they thought polar bears. So I had to be able to gear what I was saying towards something that they cared about, and they care about the big, large, fluffy animals. They don't care about grass. So that's what I had to do. And all these kids are from New York City, but they live in a city where the waterfront is almost closed off, with the exception of certain beaches, and those are only open certain times of the year. So I had to make them care about it, because they like going to Coney Island. They like going to the beach. They like kayaking. But if the water isn't clean enough for them to be able to use it, then there's no use in having it around. So I had to gear it in a way that the kids cared about it, and I had to tone it down in a way that they would understand. So to explain the parameter of pH, I used how they get stomach aches and the acidity of their stomach, because they weren't going to understand a pH scale. They weren't going to understand what battery acid was. But I had to use things that they cared about, and once I did that and put it in a scenario where everything was hands-on, they got to go seining and fishing, and they got to touch the crabs and play with different types of plants. That's when they cared, because that made it visual for them. Children are visual learners, so just looking at a textbook or making them read something isn't going to make them understand. But if I give them the opportunity to get all of these animals out of the water for themselves and say, okay, now put these animals in these buckets and organize them in the way that their food chain is set up, that's when they care. And when they're like, all right, but I want these fish to be here next time I go to the beach, how do I make sure that these fish are going to be okay, because they're cute and they're small and they're shiny and I like them? So that's when I was able to introduce the idea of conservation, the idea of being sustainable and making sure that you don't pollute as much as you can and to reduce your carbon footprint and things like that. And that's how I made the kids care.
Thank you, Nicolle, for fascinating insights. And just to add on to what you just talked about, in the study I mentioned earlier, the top 2 concerns for millennials are animals, animal welfare, as well as coastal preservation. So again, once you're thinking about how to reach the millennial generation, how to engage with them, the entryway is fluffy, cute animals, which we really care about and adore, and not taking that for granted. And now I want to move on to a couple of questions from the audience. We have a few actually that want to ask all of you about youth engagement. So not only about the practical ways of reaching youth, but also reaching youth from underrepresented communities, like Hispanics and Blacks, one of the questions I was asked, but also reaching youth in the long term and seeing how they will react to the changes. So we can start with you here.
Sure. I mean, I think the education of kids and youth is so extremely important, and that's exactly what my program Scubanauts International does. But as the question states, not a lot of kids have that opportunity. So I mean, social media is an excellent source and an excellent advantage that we have. So I think as it's fairly young, but as that gets older, it's going to be great to see where that goes and what we can use. I love the programs and the things that like Ocean Conservancy does, like the Skip the Straw initiative and things. They're great for promoting conservation, and I think you might look at those and say, not everyone's going to notice that, but I really think that people do. And talking about promoting education to younger kids or kids in places where they might not have the advantages and the access to technology and things like we do. I think the most important is to get out there and do exactly as Scubanauts does, an education through exploration. I mean, getting them out there in the field, showing them what's there, and teaching them about what's important, such as conservation and sustainability.
Thank you. Hannah, what do you think?
I think what Cole said was great. I agree completely with education. That's where I found my passion for the ocean, and that's how I got involved, was through the Shipwreck Alley class. I think, and that was in high school, so I think that to be able to start off younger and then continue on through junior high and high school, have classes like Shipwreck Alley or environmental classes in most schools or all schools would be a great way to start and see how they're going to turn out in the future and keep them passionate about it and keep reminding them and keep going more in depth on what needs to be fixed with the ocean and other climate problems.
Thank you. Nate, can you also talk about the inland problem of students who are within the not the coastal areas? How can we get them engaged?
Okay. So I can testify to the power of educational outreach opportunities, such as the National Ocean Sciences Bowl. And first of all, I just wanted to thank the supporters of that outreach opportunity and other outreach opportunities such as Sea Perch, which is an ROV competition, and ask that you continue to support those initiatives because they are very effective at reaching students and engaging them and inspiring them to be ocean leaders. From an inland perspective, very little is taught in a traditional environmental science class, which I did take, about the oceans and ocean issues. And what I think needs to be done about that is to address ocean issues on a relatable issue, because as we know, ocean issues are universal. People inland and people on the coast both contribute to the issues and also must both contribute to the solutions. And so discussing with people the effects, for example, on seafood and on food from the oceans is a great way to relate to people in inland environments, and also impacts on climate, because those are two of the ways that people inland are very affected by issues that are connected to the oceans. And in environmental science class, greater emphasis on ocean issues and on the effects of ocean issues to people inland and people on the coast would be very powerful, I think.
Great, thank you. Nicolle?
All right. So the programs that I've been in touch with and worked with have allowed me to outreach to these youth by being able to give them a hands-on experience, and I think that that's very key to teaching young people, even kids my age and adults older than me. They don't want to read. They don't want to read it. They want to experience it. They want the full package. They want to know that what they're doing makes a difference. So if you provide these opportunities, I understand the importance of testing and exams, but if you put a kid in an environment-centered class and don't actually take them out and make it hands-on, then it's just a class to them. It's just a program, it's just a course. But if you put these kids out there and say, listen, this is an animal, and this animal depends on these things, and they need you to be able to provide these things for them, then that makes all the difference for them. It helps them pay attention. It makes them have that connection with it. And then when you work in a program like that, like I did, I got invited to come back and teach the kids again next year, and a lot of the kids that were in that one cohort want to come back because they want to, even if it's relearning everything that they already did, they want to come back because they like the experience of being able to feel like they matter and feel like they make a difference, because they think of adults as the answer, but they want to be the change. They want to be the change that they want to see. So if those are the kids that you gear everything towards, and those are the kids that you make care when they're 12 years old on a diving expedition, then those are the kids that are going to want to grow up and make policy changes and make something and solve the problem.
Thank you, Josh.
Okay, so I do think that, living on the coast, those people who do live on the coast, it would be very good to implement, programs into the schools. Like, we don't have a marine science class, which I thought was just kind of ridiculous. We live right there and we rely on the ocean, but we don't have anything that really implements it into the classroom. And I think that getting those sort of things into those schools, especially on the coastline, would be really good for those people who have vested interest in the oceans and its sustainability. And as far as getting that into those inland areas that are a little bit harder to reach, I do think those programs like the Ocean Science Bowl, and things that'll give people exposure to the oceans and kind of teach them a little bit and show them the importance would be really good. And I agree with Cole that social media can be so powerful. People think about the oceans and they think about the sea otters and the seals and the whales and things that they see, pictures, images that they have in their head. And, social media can be such a great power and tool to do that. And also on the other side of awareness, so I don't have TV, but right away I saw when that oil spill happened down in California. It's right there, and you don't need to search it out. Those things tend to show up on social media. They're big, they're important, and you don't have to sit down in front of a TV at 5 o'clock to see it on the news. It's right there in your hand. So I think that technology is a really important one to help give that exposure, and so giving that technology to rural areas that might not have it could be important. Where I live, the technology, our internet isn't really quite what you guys would expect. To put it into perspective, like a half-hour Netflix show might take 2 hours. Our download speeds are less than 1 megabyte per second. So, we're slower than DSL out where I live, and I imagine there's plenty of other rural areas where they would really benefit from having those sort of technologies, so that they could have, that as a resource. So.
Thank you, Josh. And just to do a quick summary of the responses, so we have social media using it as a vehicle for more visual imagery. We have maybe funding for new programs and expeditions for students from lower income communities to go and really get a tangible feel of what the ocean is like. And the one thing I would add personally is the power of mentorship. Mentorship and really seeing people as role models. Discovery and National Geographic are great examples of explorers who are out there, who are taking photographs, who are doing these incredible journeys and films that can really provide students an idea of what that world out there is like, and an idea of I could be that person, and also seeing women and men in leadership and bringing them to the classroom and telling them, this is who I am, this is my work, and this is who you can be in the future. I want to now shift a little bit. We have a lot of questions, so I want to ask everyone to respond. If you feel strongly about responding, please do so. I will go down the line. So the question is, if millennials don't trust governments or NGOs to be vehicles for positive change, first of all, do you agree? And second of all, Who do you see as a more trustworthy or more effective institution or coalition to drive policy change? Who wants to take a stab at this one?
I guess I'll start. So, first of all, I do agree with that perspective somewhat as a millennial, but I think that at least I take a bit of a more balanced view. I think that change has to be accomplished through both individual initiative and government initiative, and it takes the synergy and the cooperation between both of those efforts to make an impact in the ocean problems that we face today. And I think that a really powerful way that millennials are impacting ocean problems and our ocean future is in corporate and business ways. Instead of focusing on financial gain, I see millennials establishing businesses that protect the environment with some of their profits instead of just continuing to procure and take more resources from the environment. And I think millennials are very supportive of organizations and corporations that do that. And so I see that as a way that millennials are trying to impact the future.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
I'll take a stab at it, I guess. So I would agree that, the individual initiative is really good, and I agree with Nate that, we aren't thinking about some of the other things that the governments and organizations are going to be concerned with. We don't have that conflicted interest. We're thinking about the oceans and, what can we do to help without really thinking about the money and some of the other things. But also, ultimately, I think things will happen on the governmental level, and kind of as it should be. It's our job to, make ourselves heard and to speak our minds about it, but to speak our minds about it to the right people and have that heard on the governmental level. So.
Great, thank you. Someone wants to stab that one? I would just add that coming from Georgetown University, one of the universities here in Washington, D.C., I speak to my friends, and freshman year, 75% went to be the next president or governor or senator. Senior year, maybe 2 are willing to pursue that. And why? It's because of how disillusioned we are with the system. It's so discouraging to see all of the lack of compromise, all of the anger and negativity in politics, which is what is making us turn to entrepreneurship, turn into having our own nonprofits, having our own NGOs. So I think down the line, once we have more of a bipartisanship approach to these issues, we're going to go back and really focus on policy change. But for now, I think engaging millennials in a really comprehensive policy reform campaign would be to really drive, okay, what are the solutions? And we are looking beyond political lines to achieve that. And now moving on to a different question is, how can youth change adult attitudes and promote marine conservation? So how can we change and influence the habits and mentality of the previous generations?
I think I'll start off with this one. And I think there are some adults that might not give us enough credit. To be honest, a lot of millennials and kids and people, they really do know a lot of things in what we talk about. And, our opinions matter. As we get older, kids like us and millennials like us will be taking charge of things. And adult mentorship and sponsorship is, such an incredible opportunity. And to have, something like that, to see adults, caring and things, it means a lot. And to have that sort of mentorship and guiding can really, promote our activism and other millennials as well. So also, to encourage a changing mentality for adults, I think just, explaining that and being cooperative is just a great idea.
I'm going to feed off of what Cole said about the mentorship. I think that adults should take mentees. I have Jeff Gray here in the audience as a wonderful mentor. He's gotten me to do great things. And I think that if a lot of other adults picked up a child and just told them all the opportunities there are, that there would be a greater relationship and more understanding with youth and adults.
I just wanted to add, I think millennials have to lead by example. I think that's something that those of us on this panel are trying to do ourselves, and something that more people in our generation need to be involved in and are getting involved in. I think that's the way that we can make change. Petitioning our governments, starting environmentally friendly corporations and organizations, supporting environmentally friendly organizations and corporations, those are the ways that we can be an example of the change that we want to see.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
I think that in order to have adults change their mentalities, yes, the people in the government, petitions, organizations, but if you get the kids, the parents will follow. As easy as it is to get a parent to take his kid to Chuck E. Cheese because he likes to run around in a ball pit, it's the same way with kids in oceans. If you appeal to their ideas and the things that they want, they're going to say, Mom, don't throw that on the ground because it's going to get in the ocean. Or stop running all the water because then there won't be enough for the polar bears. Things like that appeal to the parents because they want to see their kid smile and they want to see the kid feel good. And in order to make change now, yes, millennials and youth are tomorrow's governmental people, but today, the third grader can't vote for his representatives that are going to appeal to his interests and make the changes that he wants to see. But if that same third grader appeals to his mom and dad and his parents, then those are the people that can vote. And if they say that they want to see changes in their government and that they're not happy with the way that the ocean is being treated and the way that policies are set up and the way that our government is set up, then those same kids are going to tell their parents, listen, you really need to do something about this. And their parents have the ability to do that. Adults have the ability to vote for their representatives that enforce the things that they want to see. So if you get the kids, their parents are going to agree.
Great. Josh?
I guess that's a little bit interesting. At home, a lot of people are like-minded about conserving the ocean and keeping things right with the ocean and sustainable. And so I kind of agree with what Hannah said on those mentorships. I don't know what the youth can really teach the adults, or I don't know what I could do as a youth to help teach the adults, but I really appreciate those opportunities that I have to learn from the adults. Those mentorship opportunities are great, and the faster that our generation can learn, the faster we can start taking charge. The more aware we are, the better, and we have a long time to take action on some of those. And those are the oceans that we're all going to have to live around with for a long time, and for us young people a little bit longer. But so it's really important that we do what we can, and I appreciate those chances we get to learn from the older people.
Thank you, Josh. And I would also add, encouraging adults to expose their fellow colleagues to the millennial perspective. As I mentioned, there are many forums where youth or millennials are just not invited to the table. They're not invited to participate. And having more opportunities for millennials to have a say, to just share their experiences like we are doing this forum will be critical for adults surrounding them to understand, oh, okay, there is hope in the world, or this is what they're hoping to accomplish, and how can we further support their efforts? And so that's my take on that. I guess now the next question would be, what does each panelist perceive as the greatest threat to our ocean?
I think I might just talk about the issues with my coast, because the threats there, what happens there, everything in the ocean is, related. So what happens here is going to affect what happens there. And it's hard to put it just on one thing, ocean acidification, pollution, those two are such a big factor and they need to be looked at. And, it's hard to stop those things, but, solutions are what's gonna have to come from that. So I think maybe instead of pinpointing it on something like a physical cause, I think what really it is a lack of education and awareness. There's tons of people out there who do, who go out and use the oceans for what's going on, or for their advantage, and they don't understand their impacts. So, people can try as hard as they want and to find solutions for the actual physical problems, but without educating the public, that's where the majority of the change and that's where the majority of the cause is happening.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree with Cole, and I'm also going to focus on the area that I've spent the most time in, which is the Great Lakes. and the area that I know the most about, which is plastic pollution. So I think that microplastics are a huge threat to the ocean, and they are kind of undermined in all of the other ocean issues. So I believe that taking control of our use of plastics, single-use plastics especially, would be a big change that needs to happen. And that is also done through education awareness. Many people don't know about it, and that's why they continue to use single-use plastics. So educating the youth and adults about how harmful microplastics are to our waters is very important.
I'm particularly passionate about ocean acidification, and that's what I consider to be the primary issue affecting our oceans. 2 years ago at the National Ocean Sciences Bowl competition, the bill that we reviewed for our science expert briefing was the Federal Ocean Acidification Research and Management Bill. And that bill helped me to see the efforts that are being taken to manage and to study ocean acidification. But what concerns me is that while we are very concerned with monitoring ocean acidification, it's a very difficult problem to find solutions to because the root cause is simply carbon dioxide emissions. And I think that's why ocean acidification is the most worrying problem to me, is because the solution is so difficult, reducing carbon dioxide emissions. So I do think there are things we need to do about that. We need to, all as individuals, make efforts to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, look into carbon sequestration, further increasing the pace of the transition to renewable energies. And I think ocean acidification is a tremendous issue.
I'm going to take this in a completely different direction. I think the biggest threat to our oceans is greed. It is easier for a corporation to dump detergents in its local waterways and cheaper than to dispose of it properly. And that's the reality of it. If you take the greed out of the situation and just focus on treating the planet as it should be and as a single unit, then people are going to do things that are necessary to make sure that everybody can survive and everyone's happy. Because when our waterways are polluted and it's hard for our air to be breathed, people are going to realize you can't eat money. And so that's what allows corporations, because it's cheaper to pay the fine that's associated with dumping than it is to be able to properly dispose of something. It's easier to just ignore it and pretend you don't know what's going on than it is to admit fault. So if you remove the greed from the equation, then it'll be easier for people to restore their oceans into what they should have been and what they were before people jumped in and decided to take the gun and just do whatever they saw fit for self-gratification.
I would agree with Nate that ocean acidification, as well as pollutants going into our ocean, I would call that the largest problem, or the largest problem that I see. And because like I said, once those go into our ocean, it's really hard to take those out, and those are going to be a part of the system. They're going to continue to accumulate in our oceans. And I hate to say it, but people aren't going to quit burning fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are going to be around for a long time, and so all those carbon emissions, those do end up back in the oceans. And I think that, over some period of time, we're going to see some pretty dramatic effects, and I think we are already. And so those pollutants, like Nicolle said, it's kind of about greed, those things that create jobs, those things that create money, and they're not always the best things for our oceans. And I think we kind of need to take those into separate accounts, that here we're trying to, obviously trying to make money on the corporate side, but also we gotta keep our oceans healthy, and we can't do that at the risk or at the cost of, we can't make this money at the cost of the oceans.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Nicolle and Josh in building out the blue economy, making economic profits very sustainable, which hopefully our generation, with your help, we can help progress. Now, I have a question about coastal floodings, especially with sea level rise. So how can federal, state, and local governments support communities that are facing coastal floodings, and how can we engage youth to help with that awareness?
I think that looking at things holistically, as Josh was just talking about, is very important. I mean, you have to look at the flooding, and you have to look at the cities and what's going on. And I mean, you know, water's going to come in. It's obvious that, you know, the flooding is, you know, happening right now. Just off my coast, I mean, the inland hammocks and waterways, you know, I can remember 10 years, everything was lush and green, and then now there's lots of stuff that's you know, it's changing and dying off, and you can just look at the imagery of the area and just notice how everything is changing with the ecosystem. And I believe, you know, a lot of that is from rising sea level and flooding. And even though it hasn't had as big of an impact where I am now, you know, there are lots of areas where it is. You know, take Miami for instance. You know, it's way down there in South Florida, and there's lots of water around it. So I mean, it is now a problem. And I think what's really important is advising the people that it is a problem now, and that, you know, it's not going to be there. I mean, it's not going to be a problem for people. Let me rephrase this. It's a problem for people now, and that as you know, people can't ignore it and say, you know, I won't be here in 50 years, so I don't have to deal with that. So, but really, right now, it is taking effect, and for most people, I think that's what they need to hear.
I don't really have much experience on coastal flooding, but to get youth engaged, I would say to teach about it in the classroom, and that's going to be where they talk to their parents about it, and then that's when they're going to be getting engaged with it. So starting in the classroom is probably the best bet to get youth involved.
Thank you, Hannah. I'll move on if anyone else has a pressing comment. No? Okay. How important are the social sciences as compared to STEM for getting young people ready to save the ocean? Social sciences as economics, anthropology, etc. Or is there a balance between the two that you think is important?
Well, is someone else going to go? No? So obviously, I mean, they have an impact on each other, and you know, people are what is the cause for other ocean issues, and the fields in STEM and social sciences, you know, they go hand in hand, and it's very important for people to understand the other.
I agree with Cole.
The one thing I would add is just making sure that we can relate the two and create a bridge between, you know, engineering and the sciences and to government and econ, because sometimes it seems like someone who may be interested in oceans is really turned off because they're bad at science, and they think, oh, you know, I'm bad at the field, so I can't pursue this career goal. So making sure that we teach youth and really showcase the variety of career options, whether it is advocacy, communications, exploration, you name it, and their impact they can have in the ocean, not just in the specific STEM fields. I think that could be a way to engage a broader audience. Now, the next question I have is, many of the panel members seem to be interested in science and policy. Is anyone interested in getting involved in maritime trade or shipping or water commerce? And what's your understanding of it, if not?
All right, I think this is my time to shine. I go to a maritime-themed school. So we have career and technical education programs. We have vessel operations, ocean engineering. We have marine systems technology, aquaculture, scuba, and marine bioresearch. Although I'm not going specifically into the field of maritime commerce, a lot of my friends are. A lot of my friends are going to SUNY Maritime, which they go on to ships for like 6 months out of the year. They take a semester at sea, where it's entirely student run. They have faculty there in the event of an emergency, but it's like they're putting them out there and making them put their skills to work. So it's important to understand the maritime world, because if ships from one country travel across the globe, they can bring a species in. And then it's an invasive species, and then things like Phragmites pop up everywhere, or we have Asian shore crabs that are completely infiltrating. So it's important to understand the maritime industry and the way that that's affecting our waterways, because they're literally right there. And a lot of my friends are concerned with that, because some of my friends are going into environmental policy because they want to change the way that the government sees the ecosystem. But those that are working on boats want to use eco-friendly fuels instead of diesel or something of that nature, and they're making those changes even at the school by using different types of fuels for their boats, or being more proactive about their practices once they're on the water.
Thank you, Nicolle. Well, we have 5 minutes left, and we have 2 very pressing questions I would like to ask everyone, to just make sure you keep your comments short. So the first one is, As you can see here, we have the Capitol right on our right. Put yourself in the shoes of an elected official. Put yourself in the shoes of the debates they have to endure, the constituents they have to follow. What would you do if you were in their shoes, particularly to oceans, and what would you ask them if you were sitting right in front of them right now to do for the sake of our ocean and our generation?
Well, I actually got to meet with two of my representatives from the state of Florida already. And, to be able to meet with them is quite an honor. But I think stressing to them the importance of education, as I've already talked about, is extremely important. And, touching back on Hernando County, Brooksville, Florida, where I'm from, it's a lot of the kids that go to school or, don't even know it's out there. So education, exploration, and lots of scuba diving.
I've had the privilege to work with a lot of BWET classrooms and students that are a part of the BWET program. So I think that if we had more programs like that get students out of the classroom, get them, in my case, in the river doing water quality testing and building ROVs, getting more students to do that. So if I was in their shoes, I would be putting more funding towards that. And if I was asking a state representative to do something, it would be to create more programs and give more funding to programs like BWET.
Just wanted to say that looking at policy issues historically, I think conservation efforts have had a really great impact, a positive impact environmentally and economically, and I'll provide Magnuson Stevens as a great example of that. Conserving our fisheries produces long-term, as in longer than 4 years, of economic and environmental benefit. And so what I urge representatives to do is to continue supporting initiatives that do conservation. And I'll say we can't undermine the fishery preservation measures that we have with Magnuson Stevens. I know that debate's going on right now. We have to continue supporting our fisheries because that is going to have long-term environmental and economic implications. In other realms, in the Arctic, and with efficiency standards and renewable energy subsidies, we have to take efforts for conservation for long-term benefits.
Right, Nicolle?
I think that if I were to be in Congress or someone who's making the decisions, I understand the importance of education. And in the 4 years that I've been in high school, I've seen an exponential increase in the amount of funding that's being given to STEM and research and career and technical education. But also on the topic of funding, if money is such an important factor, why not create jobs in an eco-friendly way? You can put money towards sustainable energy. You can put money towards putting windmills somewhere. That creates jobs, that creates revenue, but it also eases the stress on needing to use other fuels, or say hiring people to survey something or to try to do water quality testing. Education helps the kids and the people that are still learning, but providing jobs that require somebody to be eco-friendly and to be proactive about their environment affects the adults as well.
Josh?
I would just urge them to look at tribes as co-managers of the resource. There's a wealth of knowledge that I think is somewhat untouched as far as, tribes have been here for thousands of years, and this country dates back, only a few hundred. And so I think that there's a wealth of knowledge that can be accessed there, and I would urge them to consider tribes as co-managers of the resource because we care about the resource, we're dependent on the resource, and we need it to ensure that our culture stays alive. So.
Thank you. And one last question. Give me like a one-sentence answer. Why millennials? How are we different, and why are we going to save the ocean?
We are the future. I'll leave it at that.
We have the social media and technology to advance further.
Each generation has more information than the last. We have all the materials we need, and we're going to take action because we have to.
It affects us now. We've seen the deterioration, but we've also seen its regression and moving forward.
We don't have to argue about whether or not things like climate change are going on. We can see that it's happening, and we can worry about how to change that. So.
Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to our panelists.
So you guys certainly get the accolade for the most applause over 3 days, and well deserved at that, especially for Daniela for leading such a wonderful discussion. And Hannah and Daniela are running off right now because on Capitol Hill Ocean Talk, they will continue the discussion in a slightly different twist from what we have now. Commanders of the Sea Women leading the way in ocean stewardship. So focusing on women in leadership, and starring on that, in addition to Hannah and Daniela, is Monica Medina. Monica has had a very long and diverse career here in Washington, D.C. as a lawyer, as a policy expert at NOAA, at DOD, at DOJ in the private sector, for-profit, not-for-profit. And so, and she's currently at Nat Geo. So that'd be a great discussion. We're back here in half an hour for our signature leadership roundtable. We'll see you then.
Favorite ocean memory is stepping foot on the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary at Ocean for Life. There I became culturally inclined and learned so much about marine conservation in the ocean.
My favorite ocean memory was when I was about 7, and we used to vacation on Martha's Vineyard, and we watched Jaws being filmed, and I remember thinking, this isn't even scary, it's like a mechanical shark. But then when we saw it in the theaters, it had a different effect, and I too did not swim in the ocean for that whole summer.
I have a lot of favorite ocean memories, but recently I had one that was pretty special. The sun was going down. I was on the west side of Maui, and I was kiteboarding as whales all around me and their calves were swimming and breaching, and it was just sort of this magical experience that I'll never forget.
I think my favorite ocean memory is the first time I ever scuba dived on a coral reef, which was a few hundred years ago. In the Florida Keys, in Luke Key, Florida, and an angelfish went swimming by my head, and I said, oh my God, this is a whole nother world that nobody knows anything about. And I knew at that moment that my life would never be the same, and it hasn't.
I think when I was very young, I was a lifeguard on the beach in South Jersey, and I was rowing one of our rescue boats, and it was a flat, calm, glassy sea. And a fog rolled in once I got offshore quite a ways. And I ended up rowing into a pod of dolphin feeding, and it was existential. I mean, the fog and the sea and the sounds they were making, and they had surrounded a pod of fish, and they were taking time, not crashing into them, but very gently going in and just picking one out, and then another one would go and take their turn. So I think that's probably one.
Playing in the waves with my dad. We have countless photos around my house of him splashing around a rubber raft that we have, and really that for me was joy.
My favorite ocean memory is swimming on the reefs in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, almost unaffected by people. I'm small fry in the ocean.
The first time I ever actually put on a scuba tank and I could just lie there on a bit of sand and watch a little fish and think about the fact that I was there and I was part of it.
Oh boy, it's hard to pick from a huge array of them, but probably, obviously, the standout one would be 8.5 minutes in my first space flight when I lifted my eyes up off the instrument panels and saw out the window, and that way actually, this broad expanse of the bright blue North Atlantic Ocean.
Well, I grew up on the beach, and all of our kids grew up on the beach, so we spent summers on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, enjoying the swimming, the surfing, the fishing, and just the family ambiance associated with being around the ocean. So, got to go there.
Being a research assistant for my brother-in-law in New Guinea, when I had first started working at NOAA as a lawyer in the early 80s. And so we were in Papua New Guinea for 3 weeks doing research. And because of my willingness to help him out in that capacity, he actually discovered and described a new nudibranch species, a sea slug, and named it after me.
We were diving out in Makah, and Makah is also a famous surf site, but it has both beautiful reefs and wonderful waves at different times of the year. We were diving out there, and these sea turtles that were somewhat well socialized with scuba divers were coming up and literally sticking their necks out to get scratched in your laps as you were diving by them. And so there's one particularly large, probably 300-pound sea turtle, kept coming up to me and literally sticking his face right in at me so I could scratch him underneath his bill, you know, right here. And after the third time, I wanted to go see the rest of the reef. I was, you know, it's like, okay, sea turtle, I've had enough. Well, my husband, who was about, 50 feet away from me, watched as this turtle floated up, came behind me, circled around above my bubbles, and came down and grabbed my hair. Thought that my hair was actually seaweed and shook me around like a rag doll. Turtle harassment in reverse until I could actually, and I was laughing so hard, my mask was filling with water, his mask was filling with water, he didn't help me at all, and turtle swam away with a big chunk of my hair, and I was getting married 3 days later in a garden where everybody was standing above us looking down, and all I kept thinking is, there's gonna be a hole in my head from this turtle. How am I gonna explain it to everyone? So that's one of my favorite memories.
My most favorite ocean memory is yet to be. People ask me, where's the best place to go diving? And I say almost anywhere 50 years ago. But it's always the next dive as well. You never know what you're going to see, but you know it's going to be good.